On the journey between human and ape, something changed. At some point, our brains began to develop differently. Now, scientists think they know when and how this change happened. We've come to Philadelphia, where this discovery was made by pure chance. Hansel Stedman at the University of Pennsylvania studies muscular dystrophy. To understand the disease better, he decided to compare human muscle cells with those in the great apes. He noticed something unusual in some of the cells in one particular muscle, the jaw muscle. He took a thin slice of chimpanzee and a thin slice of human jaw muscle and compared them under a microscope.
We're looking at a razor-thin section of one of the jaw-closing muscles from a great ape.
These red cells seen in cross-section are a chimpanzee's biting muscle fibers. But when Stedman looked at the human jaw muscle, the difference was immediately obvious. The human biting muscle fibers at the bottom are 1/3 the size of the great apes. This isn't just an isolated case. Every human jaw muscle looks the same. Stedman has discovered that in the distant past, a genetic mutation occurred. It made our ancestors' jaw muscles much weaker than those of the other apes. You wouldn't think that a weaker jaw could be an advantage back in the prehistoric era. But incredibly, it's this genetic mutation that could be responsible for something even more amazing. The secret lies in the way muscles attach to bones, in this case, the skull.
If you take a look at this orangutan skull, this is an adult male, this illustrates very nicely that muscles leave an indelible mark on the bones where they attach to them.
All the great apes have a crest along the top of their skull. They need it because their strong jaw muscles need a firm anchor. But the thick skull has another effect. It acts like a rigid and inflexible cage on the brain. In humans, our weak jaw muscle exerts far less pressure on the skull. These skulls belong to two different hominid species living together over 2 million years ago. Australopithecus boisei on the left and Homo erectus on the right. Anthropologists are convinced the genetic mutation occurred in one of these hominids, weakening the jaw muscle and allowing the skull and brain to expand. But which one? The Australopithecus has a large, ape-like jaw muscle, while the Homo erectus has a much smaller, human-like jaw muscle. It's this one that has the genetic mutation.
The other dramatic difference, obviously, is in the size of the brain case.
Homo erectus has a brain that's 50% larger than Australopithecus boisei. But when did this happen? By comparing how genes vary in different species over millions of years, Hansel Stedman has calculated that the strong jaw muscle mutated into the weaker muscle in our ancestor Homo erectus about 2.4 million years ago. It's one of the most important moments in our evolutionary history. And it's all down to a single genetic mutation.
That occurred in one individual at one point in time when there was a gene pool of interbreeding animals that all had the normal version of this gene. And yet, with the passage of time, the only surviving version of that gene in humans is the mutant version. It eclipsed all of the others that were in that breeding pool at that time through the process of genetic fixation.
A single genetic mutation, but powerful enough for our ancestors to outcompete all other hominids. But how did these early ancestors of ours survive with jaw muscles 10 to 50 times weaker than their rivals?
If you know you're going to lose a jaw-to-jaw combat, then avoid jaw-to-jaw combat altogether. Find some other way to annihilate your competitors.
And that's what our ancestors did. They switched from brawn to brain. Blessed with a larger brain, our ancestors began to cooperate. They shared their plans, developed complex social structures. This was the first step on a journey that would ultimately propel us into a different world.